is day 299 of the war in Israel. I want you to understand that we do this live, so sometimes there's changes in the program. People have to leave for emergencies, but as always, we thank you for staying engaged with us as the situation in Israel continues to evolve. We're first turning to Aviva Klompas, co-founder and CEO of Boundless, a think tank that identifies and addresses system-wide challenges to proper education on Israel and combating Jewish hatred. She previously served as the director of speechwriting for Israel's permanent mission to the United Nations in New York City. As the chief speechwriter for Ambassador Ron Prosor, Aviva crafted highly acclaimed speeches that informed public opinion. Her latest book, Stand Up Nation, Israeli Resilience in the Wake of Disaster, could not be more timely. And we're pleased to have Stefan Oberman, JNF USA's Director of Communications, in conversation with Aviva. Stefan, please take over.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lizabram. And Aviva, congratulations on the success of Stand Up Nation. I think it's really, it's a book that will resonate, I believe, with anyone who is curious perhaps about not only about Israel's disproportionately positive contribution to developing nations in the world, but also, I think, the unexpected motivations behind it. My first question, I guess, is I'm curious to know, what was your first aha moment when you realized this is a book, I have to write it? When did that moment take place?
Thank you so much, Stefan, and thank you to JNF for having me on today. I'm a big fan of the organization and always a pleasure to be with you. So Stand Up Nation, which just came out, is really 10 years in the making. The origins go back to the time I used to be the speechwriter for Israel at the United Nations under Ambassador Ron Prosor. There's one speechwriter and a lot to cover at the United Nations. The UN by itself covers a vast array of topics, from obviously peace and security and issues of global threats, but also things like international development and economics and legal issues, outer space, forestry, climate change, road safety. I mean, it's quite a remarkably long list. And I didn't have a lot of time to do research because of being only one speechwriter. But whenever it came to writing speeches about international development, I found that I would just fall down a rabbit hole reading about all the things that I found so interesting about Israel's earliest years as a pioneering state, stories about Golda Meir, who's behind Israel's International Development Agency, and this spirit of audacity that we've always seen in Israelis. And I found it to be a remarkable story and a largely untold story. Even people who are very familiar with Israel, have traveled there and studied it and read lots of books about it, have never heard of Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, and don't know that Israel was a developing country itself for its first 10 years. It was desperately poor. Obviously, it's founded in the shadow of the Holocaust and the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Jews from Arab nations. And this influx of new immigrants while having to fight wars of survival. This is not a land flowing with milk and honey as described by the Bible. It's a land that is dry and arid and swampy and malaria ridden. And there isn't really anything there. And so the new immigrants who come with next to nothing need everything from the state. And the state, while it's trying to fight these wars, is also trying to provide housing and labor and educational services and so forth, every means of what these new immigrants need. And so they're living in what are ma'abarot, which are essentially tent cities, shanty towns made of tin or wood. There isn't clean running water. The Israeli government has to set up a ministry of rations. And this is the context in which Israel goes and founds an international development agency. It's quite frankly astounding that it was possible. And I tell the story in the book about how that happened and how Israel founds an international development agency before the United States, before Canada, before England, before the UN has UNDP. And then I fast forward to the present and I profile about 20 Israelis who are the founders of truly remarkable international development and humanitarian relief organizations. And I ask the question, why is Israel so involved outside of its borders? It's certainly not winning any PR points for it or brownie points for it. And so what is the impetus? What's the driving nature behind what's going on here. And I do that through telling their stories.
Well, you clearly spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours researching, referencing, interviewing, and writing Stand Up Nation. I know in August 2023, you handed in the manuscript, and you're probably already planning the book tour and all of that. And as we know, October 7th then happened a couple months after. How did you go about recasting Stand Up Nation to fit the current paradigm?
Yeah, so I'd submitted the manuscript for the book 6 weeks before October 7th, and then October 7th struck. And for many, many months, actually, we pivoted all the work of my nonprofit Boundless just to focus on the war. So the book got set aside. But when it finally came time to return to it, it was very clear to me that I needed to rewrite the introduction in light of the events of October 7th. And also I went back to those 20 Israelis that I interviewed, and I asked them if they wanted to write a postscript to their chapters, talking about the impact on themselves personally or on their organization in light of October 7th. And almost all of them did. And I think there's 2 points in particular. First of all, one of the people that I profiled in the book, her name is Dr. Shoshan Haram, from a kibbutz that most people would not have heard of before October 7th. She's from kibbutz Be'eri. And I remember actually interviewing her while she was in her house there. And Shoshan was one of the Israelis who was taken hostage on October 7th. Her husband was murdered. Her sister was murdered. She was taken with 6 members of her family, one of whom is still a hostage inside of Gaza. And so obviously the events of October 7th profoundly impacted every Israeli, every Jew, and certainly the events in this book, and the book had to be recast in that light. The second thing is that the book coming out at this time, I think, offers a reminder to us, which is that this is truly one of the most heartbreaking and devastating periods in all of Jewish history. We're on day 299. Tomorrow will be 300 days since the war started. There's more than 100 people still held hostages, including 5 American citizens who are still believed to be alive. And it's devastating. And we've also seen the rise of global anti-Semitism. And it's difficult to know how to comport ourselves. What are we supposed to do in this moment? And the story of looking back at Israel in its earliest days, where the challenges will feel eerily familiar. It's isolated. It's being ostracized on the international stage. It's facing economic hardships. It's facing legal challenges. It's facing social isolation. It's just an outcast in the world. And in addition to all the challenges of fighting enemies who seek its annihilation. And what we've always understood, it's really in Israel's Declaration of Independence, it says that Israel extends its hand to neighboring countries, to the nations of the world, and to the Jewish people, all to be a part of the project that is Israel. We've always invited other people to be a part of this project, and we've always understood at the end of the day that we are the authors, that there are these calamities that befall us, the Jewish people, and befall Israel, but that doesn't define us. October 7th doesn't define us. It's a chapter that's been written in our book, but ultimately we're the authors of where we go from here.
You know, I think that's a really poignant point you make. And looking and reading through Stand Up Nation, you can see all these inspiring stories. And I think that really resonates with our Jewish National Fund USA base, because, you know, for us, we have many impactful projects. One that comes to mind is our Casa Joint Institute for Food, Water, and Energy Security, where we're creating these amazing partnerships with the University of Arizona, with Jewish National Fund USA, with Aviva farmers, and with Kenyan farmers. And what's incredible is there are these unexpected stories and collaborations that come out that if Israel, God forbid, wasn't there, these people would have nothing. And people don't always realize Israel's impact on the world. What are 1 or 2 stories from interviewing so many people in your book that really sort of stay in your mind, that you think about a lot? What sort of really drove home this miraculous story of Israel's contribution to the world?
There's different reasons that I give in the book. I sort of bucket the different people that I interviewed, and I explain that the reason that I believe that Israelis are so involved outside of their borders is for 4 reasons. And I call them idealism, pragmatism, adventurism, and chutzpahism. So idealism are the individuals driven by tikkun olam, who seek to make the world a better place. Shoshan Haram is a classic example of that. She had worked for a multinational seed corporation, and it was abundantly evident to her that the best seeds in the world, the ones that are best suited to grow in different climates and are going to yield the best type of produce, are going to the richest countries. They're the ones that are able to afford it. But the neediest farmers, mostly on the African continent, it's just so out of reach for them. And that was her life's work, was to figure out how is she going to get the best quality seeds into the hands of the most needy farmers in rural communities. And she was ultimately quite successful in doing so. You also have the stories of pragmatism, individuals that are seeking to uplift their communities, their societies, and their countries. So I tell the story of Save a Child's Heart. And there's a doctor, Dr. Ziwa, who became the first pediatric surgeon, a cardiac surgeon in Zambia. And he's trained by Israeli organization Save a Child's Heart. You have adventurism. These are, as we well know, many Israelis who, after they finish their time in the military, will go out backpacking, trekking in South America or in Africa or Southeast Asia. And some of them happened upon rural communities where they wanted to do something to help. And they founded organizations. And then you have a fourth bucket of the truly audacious individuals. I call them the chutzpahism category. And they're individuals who are doing this work, international development and humanitarian aid, in countries where Israel has no political or diplomatic relations, where if they were to be found out, they would be murdered. And one of the people that I talk about is Gal Lutsky from an organization called Israeli Flying Aid. And she has truly a remarkable history herself. She grew up in the kibbutz movement at a time where she was actually living in a children's home. She has always been a person who believes in giving. She tells a story about how she met a very poor woman when she was a teenager and on the spot decided to give her her mother's washing machine, figuring her mother could just use the kibbutz laundry services. And she was very moved by what she saw on the television screen during the genocide in Rwanda, and ultimately took a few $100s, put it in her pocket, bought a one-way ticket, had never been on the African continent, had never worked in international development, and really got moved by the work. And she ultimately founds Israeli Flying Aid, and their motto is, no one asked permission to kill, so we're not going to ask permission to save lives.
Wow, that's powerful. Jumping around a little bit, I want to touch on your time working as a head speech writer for Israel's mission to the UN. So working in the UN, you've miraculously managed to live and tell the tale, despite everything we see there. Is it really the circus that we think it is, or is there some sinew of hope that you still have in the original mission of that organization?
When it comes to international affairs, when it comes to peace and security, when it comes to Israel, the UN is an abysmal failure. There's no nice way to sugarcoat it. It is, as we know, vehemently anti-Israel and biased. And you can see that not only in the major bodies and organs of the United Nations, but in the individuals who get appointed, in the reports that are written, and in the circus really that is the sessions that go on at the United Nations. One thing I will say about my time there was that it did prove to really be a training ground that was very formative, certainly for the work that I do now and the approach that I take as we look around at really a bewildering set of circumstances for Israel and the Jewish people. When I worked at the United Nations, people would often ask me, well, why does Israel participate? Why participate in an institution that is notorious for its bias against Israel? And more than that, to be a member in good standing at the United Nations, you have to pay dues. So Israel actually pays its dues in order to endure the sort of abuse and bias that we see on a daily basis. And as much as I would get asked that by friends, by family, by people in the community, we never once had that conversation inside of the delegation. And the reason is it never occurred to us for a moment that Israel has anything less than the absolute right to participate in and contribute to global affairs. And that's the mentality and the attitude that I've brought into the world with me ever since I worked at the UN, which is that Israel and the Jewish people have every right to participate in and contribute to equally their communities, their societies, their countries, and the global order. We're not going to accept anything less than that. And that means needing to call out the bias. So you have the United Nations, an institution that won't even call Hamas a terrorist organization. It can't bring itself to do that. That bias needs to be called out. in a time when young Jews have to hide their Jewish identity, and we live in an age of identity politics, when people are encouraged to identify as anything they want, but the one thing they can't safely identify as Jewish, well, that's nonsense. We're not going to accept that. We're certainly not going to accept a world that will speak with great sympathy about dead Jews, but not take any meaningful action to safeguard living Jews. So we need to call that out as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I'm one of your almost 300,000 followers on X or Twitter or whatever the name of it is today. And, I can't believe what I thought you posted a satirical account where you shared the headline of the Wall Street Journal that reported on the death of the Hamas leader, Hania, where the headline, let me say it, the Wall Street Journal headline that you shared said, "Strike in Iran kills Hamas's leading advocate for a Gaza ceasefire." What is going on with these, mainstream headlines that we see? I mean, are we the only ones that see the world in a different light, or is some people in the media lost the plot? What's going on?
It's absolutely appalling, and it's not just the Wall Street Journal. If you scan the news headlines today, you'll see that there's many outlets that are calling Hania a moderate. They're calling him a peacemaker because he was allegedly in charge of the negotiations for the ongoing hostage deal and ceasefire talks. But it's absolute nonsense, because you would never see any of these papers calling a head of ISIS or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda a moderate. That they treat these organizations as if they're real countries is absurd. They lose sight of the fact that it's a terrorist organization, that there are countless clips. You don't even have to try hard when you Google to find the most abhorrent statements that Hania and other terrorist leaders have made about Israelis, about Jews, about wanting to slaughter them, and also about the ravaging damage that they've done to the Palestinian people. He was a billionaire living like a king in Qatar because he stole billions in international aid dollars from the Palestinian people and left them to suffer and to rot in Gaza. And this is a man that's now being lauded today by the international media. And that's another example of this overt bias that I see on a daily basis, and that I refuse to allow to pass without saying something, because we cannot accept that it is normal or acceptable.
Absolutely. I guess my final question to you, I and everyone at JNF, we're absolutely excited to see you speak this November 14 to 17 at Jewish National Fund USA's Global Conference for Israel in Dallas. And, I think a lot of people are attending because coming to the Global Conference for Israel is probably the closest thing you can get to actually being in Israel without traveling 7,000 to 10,000 miles to be there. For people coming, obviously they want to get a sense of what's happening on the ground. What's your biggest concern, or rather, what can the Jewish and pro-Israel community do here to really stand up for Israel and dispel the myths that they see? What should we all be doing right now in order to make sure that Israel, the truth about what's happening in Israel is getting out to our friends, family, neighbors, and the world?
Yeah, my short answer is I started with, I have enormous respect for JNF, and I think it's doing amazing work. So obviously supporting this organization and being a part of it and participating in the conference is one great way. And the longer answer I would say is that's actually a question I never get asked by Israelis. Israelis never say to me, what am I supposed to do? It's actually a question that only North Americans, especially American Jews, will ask me. And the answer is Israelis just do. They jump in and they see a need. And I would say that's the mentality that we have right now. The needs are astounding. The Jewish people are hurting. The people of Israel are hurting in a way that we've never seen before. And across the board, you don't have to look very far to see what the needs are. And they don't have to be big and splashy, like writing an op-ed or posting every 2 minutes on X like I do. It's finding a family that's been impacted by this war. It's helping to fight for the return of the hostages. It's supporting the communities that have lost their homes. It's helping with resilience programs and trauma therapy. Truly, the needs are endless, and it's figuring out what is your niche and your interest and then jumping in.
Well, Aviva, thank you so much for joining with Jewish National Fund USA and standing up for Israel. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your time today.
That's my pleasure. And please get Stand Up Nation.
Great.
We will do that, Aviva, and thank you so much for joining us today and to share your insights. And thank you, Stefan, for facilitating the conversation. I do want to let everyone know, as Stefan's also already mentioned, that Aviva is not only a member of the JNF USA Speakers Bureau, but she will be joining us in person at our global conference for Israel, taking place in Dallas from November 14th to 17th. And now we're proud to introduce our friend Nissan Zivi, who is a critical part of JNF USA's Go North initiative. Nissan is the commander of the emergency squad of Kfar Galadi, a mere half-mile from the border with Lebanon. Nissan, we know you must always be on alert and on the move, so I'll turn the mic over to you for an update without a further introduction. Nissan?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you a little bit of our challenging time here at the Upper Galilee. So first of all, I just want to say to all of you, thank you that in this crucial time you are here with us. You don't know how important it is for us to see you with boots on the ground, people that coming from the US, here to the Upper Galilee to see us, to speak with us, and to help us in numerous of challenges. So we are almost 10 months in a situation when we have more than 65,000 people that have been evacuated from their homes, and another 100,000 people that actually living in a war zone. With thousands of alarms, and the numbers are unprecedented. In the last 10 months, more than 6,000 rockets have been launched to the Galilee. More than 1,000 precision missiles hit civilian targets, and we are under constantly attack. In this unprecedented situation, we are trying to find the way we can strengthen our communities that are not here, and also to strengthen the communities that are here and they not having too much help from the government, unfortunately. I can tell you that here in Kfar Giladi, as you just mentioned, we are like 800 meters from the border with Lebanon. There is us, the emergency task force, and we are keeping our agriculture and our industry on the go, which means we doing whatever we need to do to make sure that the avocado and the lychee will be picked up from the trees as part of our values. It's also a very good opportunity for me to thank you for the support to the Kfar Giladi community with fire equipment. After the big fire last month, most of our equipment have been burnt. So with your help and with your generosity, we have new equipment that help us in this threat that constantly we have here. In the last week, we have a very dramatic week, as you all know. It started with a massacre. I don't have another word for it, in Majd al-Shams, which is a Druze village in the Golan Heights. And maybe it's an opportunity to share a little bit about the Druze villages. There is 5 Druze villages in the Golan Heights. In the last 6-7 years, they are in the process of, we call it Israelization, taking Israeli IDs, and they have election, and they see themselves as part of Israel after decades that they didn't see themselves as part of Israel. Most of the people there are working with us in agriculture and industry, and the horrific pictures of bodies of children in the middle of a soccer field right next to a playground, I think struck everyone here, and remind us the pictures of October 7th. It was a moment that all of us stop for 1 second to think if we are doing the right thing by encouraging people to coming back, because one of the things that we are doing in the last 2 months is to encourage the people not to leave the Galilee, as part of our effort to make sure that our communities are not falling apart. And to see such pictures, it brings a very big and deep dilemma in every family here in the Galilee. 2 days later, unfortunately, we lost another friend in Kibbutz Agoshrim, a member of the emergency task force, hit by a rocket near Popko, a young man, 29 years old. And I think it was the moment when everyone here understand that the red line was crossed, and the Israel government understood that it's something that we cannot accept, because every picture of dead children or dead young men, unfortunately, catalyzed more people to leave the area. So we saw the response with the assassination of number 2 in Hezbollah and the assassination of number 1 in Hamas. And we are all here very alert to the situation, even though you can hear the birds. So there is only birds here, and we are all waiting for the development that will be in the next hours. Our mission right now is to strengthen our communities and our families, and to make sure that we are bring them a ray of light in all kinds of ways. And I'm telling you, as our partner and as my partner, that JNF USA has a historic role in reshaping and reimaging the Galilee, because after everything will end up, we will have a lot of work to do here to bring back the people, to bring back the trust, to bring back the prosperity. And I see you guys as a keeper with an historic role of shaping the future of the Galilee. And I'm here for you for question, if you have any question about what's happening here in the Galilee and in the northern frontier.
So, Nissan, first of all, thank you for everything you do. We were with you before, now, and obviously in the future with a big role that we'll play with you. Where have most of the people been dislocated to from the north? Where are they now?
So actually, Saul, it's a great question, because in the beginning, in the first 6 months, most of the communities were located in specific sites in the south part of the Kinneret, in the Jordan Valley, Tiberia, Jerusalem. But I think that in the last 2 months, after we all understood that we're not going to open September 1st in our schools, thousands of families took a decision to find a new school for their children and a temporary house for them. So even though we started as we were located in the south part of the Kinneret, in the Jordan Valley area and Tiberia, now people spread all over Israel. And I think this is what concerned us most, because it's actually, we see our communities falling apart. And our main effort right now is to make sure that we are in contact with everyone and, keep let them feel that they are part of the community of Kfar Giladi or Kibbutz Dafna or Kiryat Shmona. It's a challenge that we are facing with, and I can tell you that even the government, the state, they don't have all the database about where all of the evacuees are right now. So in the last, as I mentioned, the last 2 months, we saw collapse of the evacuees sites that were in the beginning, and now thousands of families just rented places all over Israel: Tel Aviv, Ramat Sharon, Haifa, Tveria, Yerushalayim, etc.
And Nissan, obviously you know Talia very well, and she would like to say something. So Talia.
Hi. So first of all, thank you, Nissan. As much as we worked with Nissan before October 7th, our constant work with you during the last, 10 months has become, deeper and more meaningful. You became our eyes and soul and sensor of the area. And by the way, for you guys, just to know, Nissan has also become a celeb in the Israeli TV. Every night I'm waiting 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 a.m. Nissan is in the news interviewed and broadcasting from the north as to what is happening, at that moment. One of the things that came up in Russell Robinson's recent visit to Israel when we met with the Nissan in the north was the fact that many Americans are not well aware of the situation in the north. Everybody is very familiar with the Gaza envelope and the communities in Gaza and October 7th and the disaster, but many people are not aware of what's going on in the north. And as a result of which, we decided to start bringing small groups of 3 speakers at the time to the US to do public speaking together in one region, in one community, on behalf of Jewish National Fund, together with our lay leaders and professionals. And this week, beginning August 4th, the first group of very articulate and great leaders from Kiryat Shmona, Kibbutz Dan, Goshrim, Ramat HaGolan will come together this time, August 1st. The first community will be in Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. So Marina and Samantha are in charge of this visit. And then we have, as some of the professionals are already aware of, and some of the lay leaders, we have Tri-State, we have Chicago, we have Atlanta, we have LA, and every time a different group of speakers will come. So I encourage all of you to get involved and to come and to hear them and their personal stories and what they're representing, because that will give you and all of the people around you a better notion of what is going on in the North, and of course, as a result, to support the North even better. Thank you.
So Nissan, as you can see in the chat, there's plenty of people that are just saying thank you to Nissan, and I see you responding. There's some people that don't know how to use the chat, but I know that they would say thank you. I see Penny Rosen and many others that are there just thank you for everything that you do. And hopefully we'll see you soon and we'll be with you. And again, thank you for being with us. We're thinking of you, your family, your squad. Be safe, stay strong, and hopefully we'll be together with you soon. So
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Nissan. As you've heard a few times, we mentioned our global conference in Dallas. We're proud to feature Michael Rappaport, Emily Austin, Rabbi David Wolpe, Professor Shai Davidai, and others at the largest Zionist gathering in the United States. And we hope you will join over 1,200 Zionists who have already registered. You can do so by visiting jnf.org/global. There's a lot of links that we'll be mentioning here, but they're also in the chat room. And for more information on fantastic Zionist speakers who can come to your community, please visit jnf.org/speakers. As always, you can learn more about the impact you're having on the ground in Israel by visiting jnf.org/support Israel. We encourage you to travel to Israel with us on working volunteer missions. We continue to sell out these missions, and you can sign up for these trips departing now through February 2025. Visit jnf.org/volunteer-IL to learn more. You can also find information on our We Choose Life mission, a very special solidarity mission to commemorate the October 7th massacre. Stand in solidarity in Israel. Pay respect to those who were murdered, support the hostage families, and hear stories from people who remain evacuated from their communities. For now, we'll see you next Wednesday, August 7th at the same time. I'm Israel Chai.